Hi everybody, this is Father Warner D'Souza and we are in the Wednesday of the third week of Easter, Acts chapter 8 verses 1b to 8, and I'd recommend you read up to verse 12 for a better understanding. There is a sadness and joy woven together in the same passage, perhaps a well-rounded presentation of Christian life. There are some who believe that being a Christian is like wearing a coat of armor or sort of protection from the challenges that life throws us. Not so. For Christian life is a balance of both the Lord gives and the Lord takes away, blessed be His name. We are told of a great persecution that began in the church in Jerusalem the day that Stephen was stoned. The apostles remained in Jerusalem, but the disciples scattered throughout the countryside. The main protagonist of these persecutions is Saul of Tarsus, whose brutal methods included dragging men and women from their house to prison. There was no charge against the Christians, nor does it seem that Saul had any authority, but perhaps this well describes the madness that surrounds religious jingoism. Law gets taken into one's hands. But while Saul ravaged the church, the Acts tells of the workings of the Holy Spirit through another man. While Jerusalem was being ravaged, Samaria was being healed. As I mentioned before, of the 7 deacons named in the Acts, only 2 find mention again in the New Testament. We heard of Stephen and now we hear of Philip, the deacon. This stable boy, like Stephen, shares in the ministry of preaching, teaching and healing, and the impact that he makes is sufficient to bring in the big guns from Jerusalem as backup. We are told in verse 14 that the apostles send Peter and John to help Philip. For many Christians engaged in ministry, obstacles such as the persecution experienced by the early church are reasons for them to shut shop. The early church teaches us how to take the rough and the tumble in our stride, but to also pick up the pieces and move on. What often man sees as failure is an opportunity in God's eyes. He needs us to trust in Him. Philip trusted in the Lord and left for a city that was far from receptive to anything that came from their neighbors in the north or south. He proclaims Jesus to them and not some earthly anecdote or joke, and the crowds respond to Stephen's message about the Messiah. This particular text elucidates the 4 consequences when one preaches the gospel as faithfully as Philip did. We are told from the text, miracles were multiplied in verses 4 to 7, joy increases in verse to 8, deceit is defeated, and you can read this in verse 9 to 12, and finally, souls are saved in verse 12. If you like these reflections that I have been sharing with you based on the Acts of the Apostles, then may I ask you to subscribe to this channel and share these videos with your friends. Make Jesus known to the whole world. Thank you and God bless you.